What does it mean to leave a legacy? For Willie O'Ree, it meant breaking barriers. It meant overcoming physical limitations. It meant giving back to a sport that gave him so much. As the first black man to play in the National Hockey League, Willie O'Ree broke the color barrier and inspired a new generation to play the game. Willie O'Ree is the product of his grandparents' legacy. He grew up under the umbrella of their example of strength and sacrifice. His grandparents were slaves. They made a daring escape to Canada on the Underground Railroad to flee the horrors of slavery. They settled in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Willie was born in 1935 as the youngest of 13 siblings to Harry and Rosebud, still living in Fredericton. Harry and Rosebud knew and understood the value of sport in a young person's life and introduced all their children to it early on. For Willie, hockey was love at first skate. He began skating at age 3. By age 5, he was playing organized hockey. As a kid, he spent hours on his backyard rink and his local school rink, developing his skills, despite the cold that numbed his fingers and toes. Every chance I had, I was on the ice, Willie remembers. I even skated to school. My dad squirted the garden hose on the backyard, and we had an instant rink. I loved the feel of the wind rushing by as I flew along the ice. I loved the sound of spraying ice chips when I hit the brakes and spun around to charge back the other way. I loved having the puck on my stick and learning how to stick handle. The speed that I could reach on my skates when I was stick handling with the puck was like defying gravity. The O'Ree family was one of only 2 black families that lived in Fredericton, but Willie says that the fact he was black never came up when he played with his friends. In his autobiography, he wrote, "You could have been purple with a green stripe down the middle of your forehead, and it wouldn't have mattered. It was only later, when I became older, that I learned what color barrier meant." Willie also played baseball, and because of his natural athleticism, he was good at that too. His team won a championship and was given a trip to New York City. A memorable event for this young boy was meeting Jackie Robinson. Willie says he'd broken baseball's color barrier only 2 years prior, in 1947, and to us, he was an icon. They shook hands and exchanged pleasantries. Willie told him that he was a baseball player, but that his real love was hockey. Robinson smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't know black kids played hockey." Willie soon became the best hockey player in New Brunswick. He spent several years playing on area Fredericton teams before joining the Quebec Junior Hockey League in 1954. In his 43 games that season, he scored 27 goals and had 17 assists for 44 points. Playing in the league brought in some money for Willie. He knew his mom always loved the house across the street from where they lived in Fredericton. When it went up for sale, Willie used his savings to help his parents purchase it. He said, "Hockey gave me the money. They'd always made a home for me, a wonderful place. Because of hockey, I could help make a home for them. It makes me proud still." During a game one night, Willie was struck in the right eye by a puck. It sidelined him for 8 weeks, giving him a broken cheekbone and nose. It also left his right eye almost blind. Doctors told him to quit playing hockey, but this scoring phenom refused to let it end his career. He worked hard to figure out how to compensate for his blind right eye. He began to turn his head far over his shoulder in order to see. It worked, and he was back on the ice. But Willie and his inner circle had to keep the lack of vision a secret. NHL league rules prohibited players with a blind eye from competing. Willie moved up to the prestigious Quebec Aces of the Quebec Hockey League for the next season and led them to win the championship. During his second season in Quebec, the Boston Bruins called up Willie to take the place of an injured player. On January 1st, 1958, Willie fulfilled his childhood dream, making his NHL debut against the Montreal Canadiens. The Bruins were victorious that night, winning 3-0, but the real victory was what that night represented for the game of hockey. Willie O'Ree was the first black player to take the ice in the NHL. The road that followed wasn't easy. Willie endured constant racial slurs from fans and opposing players, and cheap shots, lots of cheap shots. But Willie took it all in stride. It didn't bother me. I just wanted to be a hockey player, and if they couldn't accept that fact, that was their problem, not mine. When he was traded, it wasn't the Bruins who told him. It was a reporter who called, asking for his thoughts on the trade. He spent the next 2 decades in the Western Hockey League and won 2 scoring titles. He was the fastest professional skater at that time, but because of his eye injury, the NHL never called him back up again. Remember when Willie met Jackie Robinson as a kid? Well, some 15 years later, Willie met Robinson again at an NAACP luncheon in LA in 1962. After his coach introduced him, Robinson stared at Willie and extended his hand, saying, "Willie O'Ree, you're the young fellow I met up in Brooklyn." Willie was stunned that the great Jackie Robinson remembered him. Of course he did. Willie O'Ree is known as the Jackie Robinson of hockey. You know, it's funny. The man whose vision was impaired, the man that could only see out of one eye, he was the one that broke the color barrier. And he's the visionary today, encouraging youth across the country. He's served for years as the NHL's Director of Youth Development and as an ambassador for the NHL Diversities Program. He's traveled across North America promoting hockey programs that help economically disadvantaged children. He gives talks about confidence and dedication. Willie has received many awards and recognitions over the years for his time on and off the ice, including an introduction into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2018. The NHL also created the annual Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award in his honor. The Bruins retired his jersey in February of 2021. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said this about him: "Willie O'Ree has devoted his life to our sport and our young people, to diversity and inclusion. His words of encouragement and the life lessons he's taught have inspired thousands not only to play hockey, but to incorporate our game's values and ideals into their lives. We marvel at Willie's strength and his courage, and his willingness to blaze a trail for future generations of players, and we're honored by his continuing presence as a role model, mentor, and ambassador for our sport." What is a legacy? For Willie O'Ree, it's being the grandson of former slaves who fought his own way through racism and discrimination to see his childhood dream come true. It's being the first black man to play in the NHL, and doing so with a sightless eye. It's continuing to inspire younger generations about his beloved sport, the sport that struggled once to embrace him, but now holds him up with high esteem. It's the legacy of a hero. Thanks for watching Heartbeats on the Sports Beat. If you enjoyed this video, please click to subscribe to our channel and hit the thumbs up button. Be sure to tap the notification bell so you'll be one of the first to know when we post our next inspiring sports story.